The silence of the northern edge was a cruel, heavy thing, broken only by the whip-crack of the glacial wind and the soft, steady crunch of snow beneath her long leather boots. Seraphina Valerius moved like a silhouette against the white canvas of the night, a stunning anomaly of dark elegance in the blinding wilderness. She was a princess, though not of the human kind, and her current plight was far from regal. She was hunting. Not for sustenance. The cold itself fed her hunger, a raw, demanding ache only solved by a specific vintage of warmth. She was hunting for the ancient, elusive scent of betrayal that had driven her from the decadent, cloistered halls of the Blood Citadel. Her cloak, the color of dried blood, billowed behind her, hiding the magnificent charcoal-black wings that she kept folded tight against the punishing cold. Her eyes, usually a liquid, glacial blue, were currently burning with the familiar, predatory ruby glow. The air tasted of ozone and ice and something else, something primal and untamed that made the venom in her fangs thrum. She reached the perimeter of a small, isolated cabin nestled deep within a stand of skeletal pines. It was a rustic, almost pathetic structure, yet light bled richly from its few small windows, casting deep, incriminating red squares onto the snow. It was a beacon of life in a domain of death. As Seraphina raised a gloved hand to the cabin door, a low, guttural growl halted her. It was a sound that didn't just vibrate in the air, it vibrated in the deepest, most ancient part of her vampiric soul. She spun, instantly fluid and lethal. Two monstrous figures emerged from the swirling snow. They were wolves, but not like any Seraphina had encountered in her 4 centuries of existence. They were immense, the size of small horses, their coats thick, white and dusted with blue frost. Their eyes, though, were what seized her breath, a shocking electric sapphire that seemed to hold the reflected light of the eternal night. They moved with a disturbing, intelligent caution. The wolf on the left, slightly larger and bearing a distinctive eerie blue glow across its chest, dropped to its forelegs in a clear posture of submission. The other wolf followed suit, its head bowed low, almost touching the snow. Their powerful bodies shivered, not just from the cold, but from what Seraphina instantly recognized as reverence mixed with desperate fear. The lead wolf, the one with the glowing chest, let out a mournful, drawn-out whine that was chillingly close to human speech. It wasn't a threat, it was a plea. Seraphina paused, her heart, which rarely beat and only when provoked, gave a strong, jarring thud. Her predatory instinct screamed hunt, but her intellect whispered intrigue. Wolves, even the most formidable, did not grovel before a vampire, especially not one of the bloodline Valerius. State your purpose. Seraphina's voice was low, an ancient melody of ice and command, but the wind snatched the words away. The wolf only whimpered again, then nudged its head toward the cabin door with its massive snout, its sapphire gaze fixed on her with intense, palpable desperation. It was begging her to go inside. Inside. The source of the red light. The wolves didn't move to block her path, only knelt there, shivering, their enormous, powerful bodies displaying a strange, fragile vulnerability. Seraphina took a cautious step toward the door, her senses screaming that this was a trap. The second wolf suddenly turned its head, its ears flattening, and let out a sharp, warning snarl, not at Seraphina but deep into the surrounding woods. It was a different sound, protective, territorial, and full of raw, immediate menace. Seraphina felt a shift in the temperature, not just the weather but something supernatural, a sudden spike of latent, powerful energy. This was not the chill of winter, this was the cold signature of raw magic. Move, she hissed, pulling her true nature closer, the red light in her eyes intensifying as she addressed the wolves. Or be dismissed. The lead wolf, ignoring her threat, scraped a paw into the snow, drawing a rough symbol, a circle bisected by a jagged line. It was an ancient warding sign, one Seraphina hadn't seen since the forbidden texts in the Citadel's deepest archives. It meant, protection required. Blood price paid. The creature then lifted its gaze, and for a fleeting, terrifying second, Seraphina saw not the intelligence of a beast, but the tortured, desperate soul of a man trapped behind a sapphire glaze. She took a deep breath of the freezing air. The scent of wolf was strong, of course, mixed with pine and blood, but underneath it all, she caught a subtle, almost imperceptible metallic tang, too human, too complex. A scent that spoke of shifting forms and hidden identities. A scent that she, in her single-minded focus on her vampire quarry, had almost missed. Werewolf Shifters. And they were begging her, a vampire princess, for sanctuary. They were the sworn enemy of her entire kind, creatures of chaotic moonlight against the ordered eternity of the bloodline. This was not a trap. This was a plea born of a shared, greater threat. The immediate, dangerous attraction of the unknown outweighed her ingrained hostility. The enemy of my enemy. She gave a curt, almost mocking nod. The price for a Valerius's intervention is steep, but the reward for a shared secret is priceless. Without another word, Seraphina reached the wooden door, her crimson glowing eyes reflecting the frantic fear in the kneeling wolf's eyes. She threw the latch open, not knowing if she was walking into a hunter's lair or stepping through a gateway to the very peril that had driven the shifters to her. The blast of heat and the smell of fresh, human blood hit her first. The room was small, lit by oil lamps and the furious glow from a cast-iron stove. And right in the center, slumped against a rough-hewn table, was a man. He was bleeding profusely from a wound in his shoulder, the blood staining the floor a shocking dark mahogany against the pale wood. But it wasn't the wound that drew Seraphina's entire focus. It was the man himself. His hair was the color of tarnished copper, his features sharp, aristocratic and utterly familiar. He was wearing the silver signet ring of the Order of the Crimson Quill, the very order she was hunting. And the man was already looking at her, his eyes wide with surprise, fear, and a flash of undeniable recognition. "Seraphina," he rasped, his voice thick with pain and disbelief. "You shouldn't be here. He knows you're coming." Before Seraphina could process the confirmation that she had found her quarry, a thick, silver-tipped arrow suddenly splintered the wooden wall right beside the man's head, embedding itself with a sinister thwack. It was an assassin's message, silent and deadly. Seraphina didn't flinch. She closed the door, cutting off the vision of the two massive wolves outside, and turned her glowing gaze back to the wounded man, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Tell me everything, Corbin. Or I'll let your furry little friends outside deal with the next arrow that finds its mark." The game had begun. The vampire princess was inside, the werewolf shifters were out, and the man between them held the key to an ancient war. The heavy silence in the cabin was broken only by the hiss of the stove and Corbin's labored breathing. The metallic scent of his blood, sweet and intoxicating to Seraphina's senses, filled the air. She didn't move toward him, though every instinct demanded she seize the opportunity to extract the information she craved, and the sustenance she sorely needed. The silver arrow embedded in the wall was a stark reminder that they were all currently targets of a shared, powerful enemy. Corbin tried to shift his weight, wincing sharply as the movement aggravated the wound in his shoulder. He was pale, his copper hair damp with sweat and melted snow. He looked less like a high-ranking member of the secretive Order of the Crimson Quill and more like a hunted animal. "He won't stop," Corbin whispered, his eyes darting to the wall, then back to Seraphina, assessing the danger she represented. "You found me sooner than I expected, Seraphina. But this is the wrong time for vengeance." "Vengeance is the only time I recognize, Corbin," Seraphina countered, her voice devoid of warmth. She surveyed the small room quickly. One rough table, two stools, the stove, and a narrow, closed door likely leading to a bedroom or storage. No immediate exit but the one she had just entered. Who is he? And why are two overgrown canines kneeling outside, pleading with a Valerius to step into their territory? Corbin let out a weak, dry laugh that turned into a hacking cough. "The wolves, they know what's coming. They're the last of their pack, the guardians of the northern edge, and they're desperate. They know that what's hunting me is far worse than any vampire." "Worse than a vampire?" Seraphina tilted her head, a flicker of cold amusement in her ruby eyes. "A grand claim, Corbin. Tell me the name and why it warranted a silver-tipped arrow." "Silver is a deterrent for beasts, not bloodlines." Corbin hesitated, staring at her, perhaps measuring the cost of his confession against the probability of survival. "It's not silver, Seraphina. It's osmium. Crafted by the blacksmiths of the Silent City, specifically to hunt and neutralize all ancient blood. Vampire, Lycan, Fae. It carries a venom that paralyzes the magic right out of your core." Seraphina's elegant facade cracked momentarily. "Osmium. The element whispered in the deepest vaults of the Citadel, a theoretical weapon thought too dangerous, too complex to ever be utilized. If true, the stakes had just been raised from a personal hunt for a traitor to a war for existential survival. The one wielding it is Kaelen Thorne, Corbin finally admitted, his voice barely a rasp. "He was my apprentice. A genius in forgotten metallurgy and dark alchemy. He didn't just want the Order's secrets. He wanted a world free of the tainted bloodlines that control it. He saw us, both vampires and shifters, as a blight. He's been working on this osmium weapon for years. He tested it on the shifters first, neutralizing their ability to heal, to shift fully." A cold dread settled in Seraphina's stomach. Neutralizing their ability to shift fully. That explained the frozen wolves outside, their posture of submission, their agonizing desperation. They were caught between forms, paralyzed by a magical toxin, and seeking protection from the one creature whose ancient, potent blood might resist the venom. "And you let him escape with the knowledge to create this weapon," Seraphina stated, her tone flat and damning. "I tried to stop him," Corbin protested, wincing again. "He cornered me here. The wolves, they tried to defend their territory, but the osmium poison, it just locked them. They drove him back, but they can't shift and I can't leave. He's setting a perimeter. He'll wait for the poison to finish us or he'll strike again." Seraphina moved then, a swift, noiseless blur. She didn't approach him to feed, she approached the splintered wall, plucking the osmium-tipped arrow free with two gloved fingers. The dull, metallic gleam confirmed Corbin's fears. She could feel the chilling absence of magic radiating off the tip. "The wolves," she commanded, turning to face Corbin, who watched her with a mixture of terror and hope. "What are their names?" "The large one, the leader with the chest glow, that's Elias. The other is Rhys," Corbin managed. Seraphina looked down at the arrow in her hand. "Elias and Rhys. Werewolf shifters, stripped of their power, guarding the very vampire who could either save or destroy them. A twisted, temporary alliance forged by a common enemy." "I need two things, Corbin," Seraphina said, her plan forming with brutal clarity. "First, the full extent of Thorne's plan. Where is he taking this weapon? Second, I need to know why the osmium venom paralyzes, but your blood continues to flow, albeit slowly. What is your protection?" Corbin swallowed hard, clearly weighing his life against the Order's most guarded secrets. "My protection is the very thing you seek, Seraphina. The blood price. I'm carrying the last sample of the ancient Heartstone Essence. It's dormant now, but it's the only thing that can stabilize the poison long enough to create an antidote. I was bringing it to the Citadel to warn you when Thorne intercepted me." Seraphina's eyes narrowed. The ancient Heartstone Essence. The mythical substance rumored to hold the cure to every magical ailment, and the key to true, endless immortality for her bloodline. It was the original reason for her search, the reason for Corbin's betrayal of the Order, and the very thing Thorne wanted to neutralize. She stepped closer to him, her hand hovering just over his wounded shoulder. The proximity to his blood made her fangs ache violently. "You will show me this essence, Corbin. You will tell me everything about Thorne's movements. And in return," she promised, her voice laced with chilling sincerity, "I will ensure that Kaelen Thorne does not get the satisfaction of watching you die. Not until after you have served your purpose." Corbin nodded weakly, understanding the conditional pact. He pointed a trembling finger to a small hidden panel beneath the stove. "It's hidden in the floor beneath the heat. The essence must be kept dormant." Seraphina moved toward the stove, her mind already calculating the risk. If she helped the shifters, she gained powerful temporary allies who were motivated by a fierce need for survival. If she helped Corbin, she gained the ancient Heartstone Essence. This frigid, isolated cabin was no longer a hunting ground. It was the epicenter of a desperate three-way gamble that pitted vampires, werewolves, and a lethal human alchemist against each other for the fate of all magical bloodlines. The silence outside was too deep, too patient. Kaelen Thorne was waiting for them to weaken. Seraphina knelt and reached for the hidden panel, her ruby eyes blazing with a fierce, cold resolve. She would not be undone by a human upstart. She would save the shifters, claim the essence, and hunt Kaelen Thorne back into the shadows from which he crawled. Seraphina pried open the hidden floor panel. Nestled beneath the heat of the stove, protected by layers of woven silver mesh, an irony given the silver's weak effect on her, was a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside, resting on faded velvet, was the ancient Heartstone Essence. It wasn't a stone at all, but a liquid, swirling with dormant, shimmering colors, encased in a locket of polished, deep red obsidian. She didn't touch it. The sheer concentration of raw magical energy radiating from the obsidian casing was palpable, a pulse of the ancient world. "The essence is key to the owner's bloodline," Corbin coughed, watching her with feverish intensity. "Only a Valerius can fully awaken it, but only a shifter can naturally bond with it. That's why Thorne needs both, the blood to activate it, the shifter's bond to weaponize it without destroying himself." Seraphina finally picked up the locket, the obsidian cold and smooth beneath her gloves. "And why did you bring this to me, the sworn enemy of the Order, when you could have delivered it to any other vampire house?" "Because you are the first bloodline, Seraphina," Corbin whispered, his voice fading. "You are the only one whose magical core is strong enough to resist the initial surge of osmium until the essence can be activated. Thorne knows this. He wanted the bloodline Valerius to be the first to fall, a symbolic victory. A chilling thought struck Seraphina. If Thorne knew she was the key, he wouldn't be content to wait outside in the cold. He would want to draw her out, to face her when she was weakest. He's not waiting, Seraphina deduced, her eyes narrowing. He's setting his trap. How much time do we have? Corbin slumped, fighting to stay conscious. The venom, it's slowing my pulse. A few hours at most. Thorne's perimeter is closing. I need you to activate the essence and create a localized ward now. Seraphina knew she couldn't afford to hesitate. She placed the obsidian locket around her own neck. The instant the stone touched the bare skin of her chest, a surge of energy, sharp and cold, shot through her. Her ruby eyes blazed and a faint charcoal-colored smoke, the color of her wings, curled around the locket. The dormant essence had acknowledged the Valerius blood. Suddenly the pounding on the door was not from the wind, but deliberate, heavy blows. Seraphina Valerius. I know you are in there with the traitor, a voice boomed from outside, cool, educated, and filled with a cold, terrifying confidence. The wolves are neutralized. Hand over Corbin and the essence, or I will use the next round of osmium arrows to turn that cabin into a coffin. It was Kaelen Thorne. He had moved faster than Corbin predicted. Seraphina ignored the threat, focusing on the essence. Corbin, the activation phrase. Now. The locket, it needs a drop of your blood, Seraphina. Not a drop of food, but a drop of power, Corbin urged, his eyes frantic. And the phrase, Eternum sanguis unitus lupi. Eternal blood, unity of the wolf. Seraphina didn't hesitate. She drew a silver dagger from her belt, a ceremonial piece meant for rituals, not combat. She quickly sliced the pad of her thumb, letting a single thick ruby-red drop fall directly onto the obsidian locket. The result was immediate and violent. The locket flared, erupting in a blinding white light that filled the cabin. The raw power of the essence, now supercharged by her first blood, slammed into Seraphina. It felt like her very soul was being reforged in ice and fire. She screamed, a sound swallowed by the rush of energy. When the light receded, Seraphina felt stronger, the osmium on the arrow in her hand now inert and brittle. But the power had not just stabilized her, it had reached out. Outside the cabin, Elias and Rhys, the two massive wolves, suddenly convulsed. The blue glow on Elias's chest flared, and the agonizing, trapped intelligence in their eyes intensified. They could feel the essence, the stabilizing force. Now, Seraphina, you can protect them. Corbin rasped, victory and pain warring in his voice. Seraphina focused her will, channeling the essence's power through the ancient warding symbol the wolf Elias had drawn in the snow. She sent a surge of pure, neutralizing energy into the northern edge. Outside, Kaelen Thorne saw the wave of white light, and for the first time his calm voice broke. The essence is active. Fire the osmium. A storm of arrows rained down on the cabin, not just piercing the walls, but sinking deep into the roof and the snow around the perimeter. Thorne was trying to poison the very ground beneath them. Seraphina looked at Corbin, whose breathing was shallow. The wolves are protected now, Corbin. But tell me Thorne's weakness, the one thing that can destroy the osmium before I go after him. His weakness is his obsession with purity, Corbin managed, his last words fading into a whisper. He thinks the osmium is untainted, but it requires a human catalyst. The catalyst's name is Lyra. She is his sister and she carries a dormant gene. The bloodline Valerius is the only counter-catalyst. You must find Lyra. Corbin's head dropped against the table. He was gone. Seraphina stood, the obsidian locket beating against her chest like a second, powerful heart. She was surrounded by the dead Corbin, the poisoned osmium, and the terrifying cold patience of Kaelen Thorne outside. She walked to the door, her dark wings unfurling behind her. They were immense, a silent promise of darkness and death. Kaelen Thorne. Seraphina's voice cut through the stormy night, imbued with the raw power of the essence. Your game of arrows is over. Come inside and face your end. The only response was a sharp, furious laugh from the darkness. I don't need to, Princess, Thorne called back. You just activated the ultimate tracking beacon. The essence is the bait. Every creature of the night will come hunting you now. Enjoy your fleeting, powerful moment. The clock is ticking. The sound of his heavy, armored boots retreated rapidly into the woods. He hadn't stayed to fight. He had accomplished his goal. Activate the essence and use Seraphina as the key to draw out all the ancient, powerful enemies he wished to destroy. The war had just gone global. Seraphina had the power, the shifter allies outside, and a new target. Lyra, the human catalyst. Her personal hunt for a traitor had exploded into a desperate race to save all magical bloodlines. Seraphina let the fury of Kaelen Thorne's retreat settle into the icy silence of the northern edge. She stood by the shattered wooden door, the immense charcoal wings momentarily blocking the red lamplight within the cabin. Her immediate concern was twofold: the inert body of Corbin and the state of Elias and Rhys. She folded her wings, the faint sound like heavy silk tearing. She walked to the window, peering out into the swirling snow. The two wolves were still there, prone in the snow, but the rigid paralysis was gone. The stabilizing effect of the essence was working. Seraphina pushed the door open slightly and stepped onto the small wooden porch facing the wolves. The cold was a negligible annoyance, but the scent of their fear was strong. "Elias, Rhys," she commanded, her voice softened slightly by the urgency of the situation. "The immediate paralysis is broken. Can you shift?" Elias, the larger wolf with the glowing chest, lifted his massive head, his sapphire eyes locking onto the obsidian locket glowing faintly at her throat. He tried to rise, his powerful limbs trembling violently, but the effort was too much. A low, frustrated groan escaped him. They are still trapped in the threshold of their forms, Seraphina realized. The osmium venom hadn't been fully purged, it was merely dormant, neutralized by the essence. They were too weak to hold their human shape, and too poisoned to fully inhabit their wolf form. Rhys, the second wolf, managed to drag himself forward a few inches, his gaze pleading. "We move now," Seraphina stated, her plan absolute. "The essence has made me a target, and you are my most useful allies against Thorne. I will not leave you to be picked off." She knew a full-blood vampire was incapable of carrying the weight of two massive wolves without sacrificing critical speed. A solution was needed, and quickly. She focused on the obsidian locket. The essence offered more than just stabilization. It offered a temporary bridge between their disparate magics. "I am going to create a binding cloak," Seraphina explained, speaking in clear, low tones, as if addressing fully rational men, which she knew they were. "It will link your weakened life forces to mine, allowing me to draw your strength when I need speed, and allowing the essence to continue purging the venom as we travel. It will hurt. You will resist." The only response was a sharp, decisive nod from Elias. The wolf understood the absolute necessity. Seraphina knelt, placing one gloved hand on Elias's broad, frosted head, and the other on Rhys's. She didn't look at their teeth, their claws, or the power held in their frozen forms. She looked past the primal facade into the essence of their trapped humanity. She took a sharp breath and channeled the raw, ancient power of the Valerius bloodline into the Heartstone Essence. "Eternum sanguis unitus lupi. Vitae unio in tempore belli. Eternal blood, unity of the wolf. Union of life in time of war." A shockwave of intense, shimmering violet energy erupted from Seraphina's hands, flowing into the two wolves. It was a searing, agonizing intrusion. Elias and Rhys arched their backs, their sapphire eyes widening in silent, torturous pain. Their deep growls were stifled by the magical force binding them. Seraphina felt the connection immediately, a cold, fierce, almost unbearable pressure. She was no longer just carrying her own weight. She was tethered to the pain, the exhaustion, and the immense, dormant power of two high shifters. Her vampiric strength was immense, but this connection was a heavy, taxing reality. The violet light receded, leaving a thin, barely visible purple thread connecting Seraphina to the two wolves. The binding cloak was complete. "Rise," she commanded, her voice strained by the effort. Elias pushed himself up, his powerful legs stabilizing this time. Rhys followed, their massive wolf forms now moving with a jerky, unnatural rhythm, but moving nonetheless. They were weak, but they were mobile. "We go south," Seraphina directed, turning toward the shadows of the woods. Thorne spoke of a catalyst named Lyra. "She is the key to his osmium weapon, and the only person who can stop it. She will be somewhere densely populated, where he can use her to create the greatest fear and chaos." She glanced back at the cabin where Corbin lay dead. "Leave nothing that can track us," she instructed the wolves. Elias nudged the door shut with his snout, then used his paw to quickly sweep fresh snow over the arrow hole, erasing the immediate sign of her presence. Their efficiency was impressive, even in their weakened state. Seraphina unfurled her wings fully. They were magnificent, spanning nearly 10 feet, catching the scant moonlight. The heavy burden of the binding cloak required her maximum physical output. "Hold on," she warned them, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. With a powerful, silent thrust, Seraphina launched herself into the frigid air. The massive wings beat twice heavily before settling into a rapid glide. Elias and Rhys felt the sudden, terrifying uplift, the connecting purple threads pulling taut but not breaking. They were being dragged rapidly across the snow, their powerful bodies bouncing and scraping, unable to keep pace, but the binding cloak held. Below them, the northern edge cabin shrunk to a red pinprick of light, soon swallowed by the vast, unforgiving darkness. Seraphina flew low, driven by a desperate, newfound purpose that was no longer purely selfish. She was not just hunting a traitor for her bloodline, she was protecting the only key to the Heartstone, and the two most dangerous yet vulnerable creatures now bound to her fate. They were heading toward the chaos of the human world, a place she hadn't visited in decades, where Thorne was waiting. The hunt has begun. The prey is now the hunter. The flight south was brutal. The binding cloak, while effective in connecting their magics, was a severe drain on Seraphina. She had to constantly channel the Heartstone Essence to maintain the structural integrity of the spell, preventing the Osmium venom from flaring up in Elias and Rhys. The two wolves, dragged across the frozen landscape beneath her, occasionally let out low, pained whines that resonated directly into her consciousness through the magical link. It was a constant reminder of their shared vulnerability. After nearly 12 hours of continuous, grueling movement, Seraphina felt the unmistakable shift in the air, the humid, polluted smell of human civilization, replacing the clean, sharp scent of the glacial north. They were approaching the sprawling, nameless border city that served as a gateway to the major metropolises. She guided them into the deepest, most shadowed woods just outside the city limits. Landing was jarring. Her exhausted wings scraped against the icy branches before she settled silently onto the frozen earth. Seraphina immediately deactivated the binding cloak. The connection severed with a gasp of effort from her, and two sharp, immediate convulsions from Elias and Rhys. The wolves slumped onto the snow, exhausted but alive. "Rest," Seraphina commanded, her voice hoarse. "We are near human presence. You must remain hidden and completely silent. I need information before Thorne makes his next move." Elias, despite his exhaustion, struggled to push his head against her leg in a gesture of weary gratitude before settling down. Rhys merely watched her with intense, sapphire scrutiny, his breath clouding the air. Seraphina turned and melted into the shadow of a colossal ancient oak. She removed the obsidian locket, covering its faint glow with her hand. She needed to enter the city, but her current appearance was far too noticeable. The transformation was slow, meticulous, and agonizing, a learned discipline that masked her true form. Her immense wings retracted, dissolving into the charcoal-dark cloak she wore. The ruby glow in her eyes dimmed, replaced by the cool, liquid blue of her controlled state. Her fangs receded, and the air of ancient, untouchable royalty was replaced by the polished, severe elegance of a high-society urbanite. She was now just Seraphina Valerius, a strikingly beautiful, pale woman of severe means and colder disposition. She found a secluded, abandoned hunting trail and began the long walk into the city's industrial periphery. The first clue came not through scent or supernatural warning, but through the coarse static of a forgotten, discarded human radio half buried in the snow near the city's main power substation. Authorities are confirming 3 fatalities inside the old Willowbrook Research Facility, site of last night's catastrophic structural collapse. Sources indicate the victims were staff scientists, but the circumstances are highly irregular. Eyewitnesses reported a man fleeing the scene carrying a small, silver container, believed to be highly volatile chemical waste. Willowbrook. Seraphina knew that name. It was a known, albeit minor, subsidiary of the Order of the Crimson Quill, specializing in volatile magical compound storage. Thorne hadn't gone for a major, obvious target. He had gone for the volatile chemicals. The osmium needs a corrosive dispersal agent, Seraphina realized instantly. Thorne was escalating his weapon, creating not just poisoned arrows but a poison gas or dust. She followed the radio signal's details to a nearby, dimly lit back alley pub, a place where secrets, human and otherwise, often went to die. She slipped inside, becoming a dark patch against the harsh yellow interior. The atmosphere was thick with cheap beer, cigarette smoke, and nervous chatter. Seraphina moved to the bar, her presence causing a brief, intimidated silence among the clientele. She ordered nothing, only watched, listened, and used the subtle mental influence of her bloodline to draw information from the bartender. "The Willowbrook disaster," Seraphina murmured to the bartender, her voice low and hypnotic. "Were the victims the only ones inside?" The bartender, a weary man named Garrett, visibly paled under her gaze, his own mind temporarily pliable to her will. "No ma'am. There was the girl, Lyra. She worked there, processing the materials. They say she was the key to stabilizing the volatile compounds, a unique neural signature, they said. She disappeared right before the collapse. Thorne took the chemicals but he left her. He left her, Seraphina repeated, the implications sinking in. Thorne hadn't taken Lyra. He hadn't needed to. Corbin said Lyra was the catalyst. If she was genetically unique, perhaps his sister as Corbin claimed, then she was the counter-catalyst to the Osmium. He wanted Seraphina to find her first. Where would a frightened, unique girl hide in this city, Garrett? Seraphina pushed, leaning closer. Garrett shivered. Her family, she had an elderly aunt, lives far out in the abandoned district. The old clock tower district. No police go there. The old clock tower district. Densely populated, yet lawless and abandoned by the authorities. The perfect place for Thorne to set his trap, forcing Seraphina to expose the essence's location in a wide-scale confrontation. Seraphina dropped a valuable gold coin onto the bar, a shimmering token of her thanks and a guarantee of the bartender's silence. A man with copper hair and a scar over his eye. Has he been through here? Yes, ma'am, Garrett whispered, his eyes wide with fear and awe. Yesterday. Asked about the girl. He was wearing dark leather. Carrying a silver-tipped crossbow. Looked like the devil's own hunter. Kaelen Thorne was close. He was still hunting Lyra, or perhaps he was simply stalking Seraphina's path, preparing to ambush her as she approached the catalyst. Seraphina turned from the bar, the gold coin gleaming in the dim light. She had the location, the old clock tower district. She had the name, Lyra. And she knew Thorne's intention, a wide-scale, osmium-fueled confrontation. She had to move now before Thorne could use the stolen chemicals to poison the entire district, forcing Lyra out of hiding and neutralizing the Heartstone Essence's advantage. She slipped back into the night, the urban noise fading behind her. She had a long journey back to the woods to collect Elias and Rhys. She needed their strength, their instincts, and their brute force for the inevitable confrontation in the labyrinthine darkness of the clock tower district. Seraphina returned to the fringe of the woods with the swift, silent grace of a creature entirely comfortable in the shadows. She found Elias and Rhys exactly where she had left them. Their massive forms were now coated with a fresh layer of frost, but their sapphire eyes instantly snapped open at her presence. The faint purple glow of the Heartstone Essence on her chest was a beacon of both life and danger. She knelt between them, her blue gaze direct and unwavering. Thorne has acquired volatile chemicals from the Willowbrook facility. He intends to use them to disperse the osmium venom over a large civilian area, the old clock tower district. That is where Lyra is hiding. Elias struggled to his feet, his immense wolf body still moving stiffly. He knew the implications. A catastrophic event that would kill thousands of humans and, more importantly to them, expose every remaining shifter and vampire to Thorne's poison. The binding cloak must be maintained, Seraphina continued, her voice low and practical. I cannot face this alone. I need you as the eyes and ears on the ground. I need your strength. But most importantly, I need your focus. She looked directly at Elias, the leader. Elias, I know you resent this unnatural alliance. I know the Valerius bloodline is the ancient enemy of your people. But I have the essence. I have saved your life and the life of your brother. I give you my vow, if we survive this and if we capture Thorne, I will use the essence to fully purge the osmium from your blood. You will have your full shift back. Elias stared at her for a long moment, the raw intelligence and pain in his sapphire eyes almost unbearable. The vow of a bloodline Valerius was not a promise. It was an unbreakable curse or blessing, sworn on the core of their immortal existence. It was the highest contract a vampire could offer. Slowly, deliberately, Elias dipped his head in acknowledgement. The pact was sealed. Rhys, watching his brother and the vampire princess, followed suit, his movement sharper, more guarded. Good, Seraphina said, rising swiftly. We have no time for the ritual of the binding cloak. We will use the remnants of the previous connection. It will be rougher but faster. She reached out, touching the barely visible purple thread still clinging to the fur on Elias's shoulder. She channeled a sudden, sharp burst of Heartstone power, like striking a dead nerve with lightning. The connection snapped back into place. Seraphina felt the familiar, overwhelming weight of their proximity, but also their powerful, wild instincts surging into her mind. The heightened sense of smell, the map of the shadows, the immediate alertness to danger. The clock tower district is a labyrinth of abandoned buildings and narrow streets. We move quickly on the ground, Seraphina directed. Elias, you will be my spearhead, scouting the path and eliminating immediate threats. Rhys, you will be my anchor, protecting our rear. Stay out of the light and keep your movements silent. We must not alert the human authorities, or we will be overwhelmed by mere mortals while Thorne slips away. With a final check of the cold, dead landscape, Seraphina shed her human composure. Her features sharpened, the blue control in her eyes flickered, threatening the return of the ruby glow. She was no longer a beautiful woman, she was a predator on a mission. They began their entry into the city. Seraphina moved at a blurring pace, her speed enhanced by the adrenaline and the magical tether to the two powerful wolves. Elias, though his movements were restricted, ran in a low, terrifying lope ahead of her, his massive body a moving shadow. Rhys followed closely behind, his intense focus a silent shield. The city was a stark contrast to the quiet northern edge. Noise pollution, cars, distant sirens, human chatter, assaulted Seraphina's senses. The smells were overwhelming, processed food, oil, human sweat, and stale garbage. As they drew closer to the old clock tower district, the atmosphere changed. The sounds of sirens faded, replaced by an eerie quiet. The buildings became older, facades crumbling, windows gaping like empty eyes. The streets were strewn with trash, and the air held the metallic, unsettling smell of damp iron and decay. Elias suddenly stopped, his powerful body freezing mid-stride. He let out a low, almost silent growl that Seraphina felt directly in her consciousness. Smell of osmium. Strong. Close. Seraphina crouched low beside him, her eyes scanning the shadows. High above them, the massive, broken face of the old clock tower loomed, its hands frozen at midnight, a perpetually dark hour. She saw it then. Tucked into the deep shadows of a derelict loading dock, a sleek, black van was parked, totally unmarked. And near the rear door of the van, a faint, almost invisible cloud of shimmering, crystalline dust hung in the air, catching the scant moonlight. Osmium dispersal dust. He's here, Seraphina hissed. Thorne has set up his base of operations. As she spoke, a figure in dark, reinforced leather and a heavily scarred face emerged from the loading dock, carrying a complicated high-pressure dispersal unit, a massive cannon of metal and osmium-laced volatile compound. Kaelen Thorne. He didn't see Seraphina or the wolves in the deep shadow. He was looking up at the clock tower. Soon, Princess, Thorne muttered to himself, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet night. The Heartstone will be mine and the world will be purged of your kind. All I need is Lyra's sweet, innocent signature to set the final trap. Seraphina knew they were at the point of no return. Thorne was preparing to unleash the osmium gas. She had mere minutes to intercept him and find Lyra before the entire district became a death zone. She looked at Elias and Rhys. Attack plan? Elias, you take down the van. Disable his escape. Rhys, you create a diversion on the left flank. I take Thorne. No mercy. The two wolves responded with two sharp, low barks that echoed their readiness and desperation. The hunt was on. The order was given and the night shattered. Elias moved first, a blur of white and sapphire in the deep urban shadows. His initial low growl escalated into a terrifying sustained snarl that announced his attack. He bypassed Kaelen Thorne completely, focusing his immense bulk on the sleek, black van. With a ferocious leap, Elias slammed into the vehicle's rear axle. The sound was a horrific crunch of twisting metal and snapping chassis. The van listed immediately, its tires spinning uselessly against the pavement. Escape was now impossible. Rhys, running low and wide on the left flank, used his momentum to scatter a pile of abandoned industrial piping. The deafening, metallic crash echoed through the deserted streets, creating a perfect diversion. Kaelen Thorne, startled by the sudden, violent noise, spun away from his dispersal unit. His scarred face contorted in a mask of fury. He immediately reached for the osmium-tipped crossbow strapped to his back, his eyes frantically searching the shadows for the source of the attack. Wolves, you pathetic, half-shifted mongrels. Did you think a mere ward could save you from me? Thorne roared, his voice laced with the bitterness of a true zealot. But before Thorne could even raise his weapon, Seraphina struck. She didn't run, she flew. Launching herself from the shadow of the oak, her charcoal wings unfurled for a split second to give her supersonic thrust, before folding back tight against her cloak. She hit Thorne with the focused, chilling force of a battering ram. Thorne was thrown violently across the loading dock, skidding on the rusted metal floor. His crossbow clattered uselessly away. Seraphina landed lightly on the dock, the obsidian locket glowing fiercely, feeding her strength. You speak of mongrels, Thorne? Seraphina's voice was a low, dangerous purr. You are merely a human who stole a science. You are nothing to the bloodline Valerius. Thorne struggled to his knees, his eyes wide, finally registering the immense power radiating off her. The power of the activated Heartstone Essence. You activated it. You fool. You just made yourself the grand prize. And you, Kaelen, Seraphina countered, kicking the Osmium dispersal unit away from his grasp, just became the casualty. Thorne, however, was not defenseless. He grabbed a small ornate vial from his leather belt. Before Seraphina could react, he smashed it on the ground. A cloud of thick black smoke immediately engulfed the area, laced with the metallic tang of osmium. It was a localized, concentrated dose of the venom. Seraphina recoiled instantly, trusting her instincts. The binding cloak flared violet, drawing maximal power from the essence. She felt the osmium trying to invade her lungs, trying to paralyze her magically, but the essence held it at bay, though the sheer effort was overwhelming. Elias, despite his weakened state, roared and charged through the smoke, his sapphire eyes burning. He knew Seraphina was vulnerable to this concentrated attack. He found Thorne scrambling away and clamped his massive jaws not on Thorne's throat, but on his armored shoulder. Thorne screamed, not from the physical pain, but from the sudden chilling cold of the wolf's bite. "Get off me, beast." Thorne struggled, drawing a short, wickedly curved osmium-dusted dagger. Seraphina, clearing the immediate smoke cloud with a forceful beat of her wings, saw the danger. Thorne was about to stab Elias. "Elias, break," she commanded through the binding cloak. The wolf released Thorne instantly, responding to the direct, agonizing intrusion into his consciousness. Thorne stumbled back, his shoulder bleeding but still holding the dagger. "You control them with magic? A vampire controlling a Lycan? Disgusting." Thorne spat, hatred fueling his movements. "Desperation is a powerful binder," Seraphina coolly replied. "Now where is Lyra?" Thorne laughed, a high manic sound. "In the safest place, princess. Up there." He pointed the dagger straight up at the massive, broken clock face looming high above the loading dock. "She's the clock's heart now. And when the Heartstone calls, she will break. And when she breaks, the world breaks." Thorne used the distraction to throw a handful of black metallic dust, pure osmium powder, directly into Seraphina's eyes. Seraphina cried out, clutching her face as the paralyzing venom instantly began its work on her hypersensitive visual nerves. She was blinded, and the sudden, overwhelming sensation of paralysis threatened to break her concentration. The binding cloak wavered. At that moment, Rhys, who had been guarding the perimeter, rushed forward. He saw his brother Elias, weakened and panting, and his supposed enemy, Seraphina, temporarily blinded. He didn't hesitate. Rhys used his powerful body to slam into Thorne, knocking the dagger out of his hand and sending it skittering away. Thorne, furious, turned his attention to Rhys, realizing the extent of the shifter's protection. He drew a small electrical device. "You want to play bodyguard, wolf? Then suffer 100 years of pain." Thorne deployed the device, a focused pulse of paralyzing sonic energy designed to destabilize the shifter's trapped form. Rhys instantly seized up, his powerful body vibrating violently as the agony surged through him. Seraphina, fighting through the temporary blindness and the osmium's dulling effect, heard Rhys's silent, telepathic scream through the binding cloak, a pain that was almost enough to shatter her resolve. "I need eyes. I need air. I need Lyra." She ripped her cloak from her back, exposing her immense wings. She beat them with devastating force, not to fly but to create a localized tornado. The raw, supernatural wind ripped through the dock, clearing the osmium dust and pulling the residual venom off her eyes. Vision returned slowly, painfully, but Seraphina was in action immediately. Thorne was preoccupied with Rhys, trying to maintain the debilitating sonic attack. Seraphina moved past them both, ignoring the battle. Thorne was a distraction. Lyra was the key. She launched herself straight up toward the massive, broken face of the clock. "You can't leave them, princess. They're your power." Thorne shrieked from below, desperately trying to maintain the attack on Rhys while watching Seraphina ascend. "Their loyalty is earned, human," Seraphina hissed, already halfway up the tower. "Your fear is not." She reached the broken clock face, scaling the rusty iron with effortless grace. She found a narrow, dark alcove behind the massive, frozen minute hand. And there, huddled in the darkness, was a young woman no older than 20. Her copper hair was the same as Corbin's, her eyes wide with terror. She was holding a small, silver locket, almost identical to the obsidian one Seraphina wore. This was Lyra. The human catalyst, the counterforce to the osmium, the sister of the man who sought to destroy them all. "Lyra," Seraphina whispered, her voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. "We have to move. No. Your brother is below." Lyra looked up at the terrifying, winged figure, her eyes flickering from fear to a strange, almost resigned recognition. She clutched her own locket tighter. "It's too late," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "My locket is the core. And it's already vibrating. Kaelen is using the sonic device on the ground to trigger a cascade reaction. The moment I touch your Heartstone Essence, the Osmium will detonate. It will happen on contact." Below, Rhys's silent scream of pain finally broke Seraphina's concentration. The binding cloak snapped, leaving Seraphina alone, Lyra's locket vibrating violently in the dark. Seraphina's world fractured. The silent scream of Rhys as the binding cloak snapped echoed the external reality. She was isolated, compromised, and facing a deadline. Below her, the battle was lost if she didn't intervene. Beside her, Lyra's terror was justified. Lyra's locket, made of dull silver, pulsed violently, its rhythm matching the faint, high-pitched whine emanating from Kaelen Thorne's sonic device below. The locket wasn't just a containment unit, it was the core activator for the mass detonation of the osmium gas. "Explain," Seraphina demanded, fighting the remnants of the osmium blindness and the desperate urge to rush down to save Rhys. The Heartstone Essence in her obsidian locket responded to her fear, glowing with an urgent, almost blinding white light. "Corbin was wrong about the full process," Lyra said, clutching the silver locket to her chest. "The osmium venom requires a human amplifier to be dispersed safely and efficiently in large doses. That's me. My genetic signature neutralizes the compound's volatility until it finds a magical core." Lyra's eyes, copper like Corbin's hair, were fixated on the Heartstone Essence on Seraphina's chest. "My locket contains a synthesized osmium stabilizer. It's what my brother uses to keep his dispersal cannon from exploding in his face. But if my stabilizer comes into direct contact with the raw, activated essence, like yours, it will overload and detonate the entire osmium supply he has stockpiled in the city. A magical annihilation. He planned for you to find me, Princess." The true horrifying genius of Kaelen Thorne's plan was revealed. He hadn't intended to fight Seraphina. He intended to coerce her into triggering a catastrophic event that would wipe out the magical world, with her as the patient zero. Seraphina's mind raced, fueled by the cold logic of centuries of survival. She couldn't touch Lyra and she couldn't leave her because if Lyra was killed, the stabilizer would fail, and the osmium would detonate anyway. The sonic device, Seraphina pointed to the pulsating locket. "Thorne is using it to destabilize your locket's frequency. It's a countdown. He's trying to force me to run to you for protection," Lyra whispered, tears freezing on her pale cheeks. "He knows your essence is the strongest counter-frequency. He wants the collision." Suddenly, the floor of the clock tower below them shuddered violently. A tremendous, agonizing roar, Elias, shook the structure. The sound was not just pain, it was the desperate sound of a life being consumed. Seraphina looked down, her ruby eyes blazing with fury and frustration. She could see Elias, his immense wolf form thrashing against Thorne's relentless attack, his movements slow and agonizing. And Rhys, entirely motionless, paralyzed by the sonic weapon, his body radiating waves of paralyzing, unpurged venom. She had to make a choice: save the wolves and risk Lyra's proximity, or maintain distance and watch her allies die. "There must be a distance," Seraphina insisted, turning back to Lyra. "A safe threshold where the essence can heal without detonating the stabilizer." "What is it?" Lyra shook her head violently. "I don't know. But the osmium dust on the loading dock, that's too close. If we stay here and the sonic device continues, the stabilizer will fail in minutes anyway. The whole clock tower will become the epicenter." Seraphina knew the time for caution was over. Her vow to Elias and Rhys was more than a contract. It was the anchor of her current existence. She needed them alive to fight Thorne. "We move," Seraphina stated, seizing Lyra by the arm, careful not to let her touch the locket. "The city's underground. We will put as much physical space between your stabilizer and Thorne's sonic attack as possible. The essence will protect us, but you must keep that locket away from mine." Seraphina unfurled her wings, the powerful charcoal membranes catching the wind. She wrapped her cloak tightly around Lyra, securing the girl against her chest, making sure the two necklaces were separated by layers of thick fabric and her own body. "Hold on," she commanded. With a powerful thrust, Seraphina launched herself and Lyra through the broken aperture of the clock face and into the night air. The descent was rapid, silent, and entirely focused on escape. Thorne, seeing his ultimate prize flying away, let out a howl of pure, concentrated rage. He abandoned his sonic attack on Rhys, the activation of the essence was more important, and ran to the edge of the loading dock. "You won't escape, Princess. The Heartstone is a beacon. You are painting a target on her back for every creature in this city. Thorne screamed. Seraphina ignored him, landing roughly in a narrow trash-strewn alley behind the clock tower. Elias, partially revived by the cessation of the sonic attack, managed a pained whimper and began to drag his massive body toward the alley entrance. Rhys was still paralyzed, helpless. Elias, Seraphina whispered to the struggling wolf through the residual link of their bond. Follow the alley. Find the drain. We are going below. She didn't wait. With Lyra in tow, Seraphina entered the cramped, oppressive darkness of the alley. She found a rusted maintenance grate leading down into the city's ancient storm drainage system. We are going into the belly of the city, Lyra, Seraphina stated, prying open the grate with a casual flick of her vampiric strength. It is cold, dark, and filled with things far worse than your brother. Stay close. And do not, under any circumstances, let our lockets touch. As they descended into the sewer system, Seraphina felt the tremors of Elias's enormous body dropping into the tunnel behind them. They were safe for now, hidden beneath layers of concrete and steel, but they were running on borrowed time. Thorne knew their direction, and the Heartstone Essence was a signal fire to every supernatural entity in the city. The game was no longer about survival. It was about the race to stabilize Lyra before the final detonation. The descent into the city's storm drains was a plunge into a world of echoing darkness and rank, overwhelming smells. Seraphina moved with practiced swiftness through the knee-deep, frigid water, her only light the faint, spectral glow of the Heartstone Essence on her chest. Lyra, secured tightly in Seraphina's arm, gasped with fear and the shock of the cold. The sewer system was a vast, unforgiving labyrinth of damp concrete and rust. Focus, Lyra, Seraphina commanded, her voice cutting through the echoing water. We must move away from the source of the sonic vibrations. I can feel it, Lyra stammered, shivering uncontrollably. My locket. The frequency is still trying to find me. It's like a terrible ringing in my head. The silver locket around Lyra's neck was vibrating less violently than it had in the clock tower, but it was still a persistent tremor, a constant reminder of the ticking clock to detonation. Behind them, the terrifying rhythmic splash drag sound indicated Elias was following. The immense wolf form was too large for the narrow maintenance tunnels, forcing him to crawl and fight the strong current. His struggles and low, pained groans resonated through the residual magical link Seraphina still felt from their previous binding cloak, despite its rupture. He is still too weak, Seraphina realized. The Osmium was fighting the Essence's limited reach, and the physical strain of navigating the sewer was exhausting him rapidly. Elias, fall back slightly. Use the wider conduits, Seraphina mentally urged, trying to project the image of a wider junction she recalled seeing in the blueprints of the old city archives. The telepathic connection was faint, but it was enough. The splash drag sounds receded slightly as Elias changed his trajectory. Suddenly Seraphina stopped dead. The sound of their own movements was swallowed by a new, more unsettling sound. A high-pitched, chittering rustle multiplied by the cavernous acoustics of the tunnels. What is that? Lyra whispered, her body tightening in Seraphina's grip. Seraphina did not answer. The smell was the clue, not the scent of human filth but something earthy, ancient, and hungry. Her vampiric senses, though dulled by the osmium dust, were screaming a primal warning. From the dark mouths of 3 intersecting tunnels they emerged. Not rats but creatures far worse, ghouls. Their skin was tight, pale and damp, their eyes entirely white, and their movements jerky and unnaturally swift. They were the scavengers of the magical underworld, drawn by the scent of fresh human blood and, more ominously, the potent raw power of the essence. The ghouls hissed, their sharp, needle-like teeth exposed. They hadn't seen a creature of Seraphina's bloodline in centuries. She was a feast. Stay behind me, Lyra, Seraphina ordered, pushing Lyra to take shelter in a small dry alcove. Seraphina didn't bother with finesse. She was exhausted, pressed for time, and fueled by a cold rage. Her nails elongated into razor-sharp talons, black as obsidian. The first ghoul lunged, and Seraphina met it with a swift, powerful kick that sent the creature flying back, slamming into the concrete wall with a sickening crunch. The others came in a rush, desperate and mindless. Seraphina fought like a whirlwind of shadow and lethal grace. Her focus was purely defensive, protecting Lyra and the essence. She didn't bite, conserving her strength, relying on brute force and the paralyzing terror her presence naturally evoked. A ghoul tried to flank her, but Seraphina grabbed its skull and crushed it with a single brutal exertion of strength. The fight was quick, savage, and loud. The sound of combat and snapping bone echoed terribly, drawing the attention of anything else lurking in the darkness. As the last ghoul fell into the water, Seraphina felt a massive, powerful presence surge into the tunnel from the east. It wasn't Elias. It wasn't Thorne. It was something heavier, faster, and infused with a different, unsettling magic. "They're here," Seraphina thought, the words chilling her to the core. Thorne's beacon worked. The essence, now fully active, had indeed drawn every predator in the city. A figure landed heavily at the mouth of the tunnel where the ghouls had appeared. It was a man, but unnaturally tall and broad, clad in armor made of dark, segmented dragon-scale leather. His face was hidden behind a smooth, black visor, and a pair of massive, glowing emerald eyes peered out. He carried a twin-bladed, silver-inlaid axe, the unmistakable weapon of a draken hunter. These were ancient mercenaries, employed by rival bloodlines or anti-magical factions, notorious for their brute strength and relentless tracking abilities. The draken hunter ignored the dead ghouls and fixed its emerald gaze on Seraphina, or rather, the obsidian locket. Princess Valerius, the hunter's voice was a deep, synthetic rumble, amplified by his visor. "The reward for the Heartstone Essence is too great to ignore. Surrender the relic and the human catalyst, and your life may be spared." Seraphina stood her ground, blood dripping from her talons and onto the wet concrete. She was surrounded by the stench of decay and the chilling prospect of a battle against an armored supernatural fighter. "I am Seraphina Valerius," she stated, her voice cold and unyielding, "and I surrender nothing to a paid dog." The hunter didn't flinch. He raised the massive, gleaming axe. Suddenly, a loud, roaring challenge erupted from the tunnel behind Seraphina. Elias, battered and waterlogged, his fur matted with filth, burst into the junction. He saw the new threat to Seraphina and the powerless Lyra. The Osmium venom and his physical pain were forgotten in a wave of primal protective fury. Elias, still unable to fully shift, threw his massive wolf body at the draken hunter. The collision was immense, a cacophony of metal against bone and fury against armor, echoing violently through the underground labyrinth. Seraphina knew she had a fleeting window of opportunity. Elias was sacrificing himself, holding the line against a superior, armored opponent. She grabbed Lyra and pushed her forward, deeper into the darkness. "Run. Go," Seraphina commanded, turning briefly to see Elias and the draken hunter locked in a brutal, desperate struggle. "We must find a way to stabilize Lyra. Elias is buying us time. Don't waste it." They plunged forward into the blackness, leaving the sounds of the terrifying battle behind them, knowing that every moment Elias fought was a moment closer to his complete annihilation. Seraphina moved through the winding sewer tunnels with desperate speed, the frigid water splashing around her boots. Lyra was a dead weight, shivering and exhausted, but Seraphina's vampiric strength kept them moving relentlessly. The constant, low thrum of the silver locket around Lyra's neck was a painful reminder of the osmium detonation ticking within the city. The deafening sounds of the brutal struggle between Elias and the draken hunter were now muffled, swallowed by the winding concrete tunnels, but Seraphina could still feel the echoes of the fight, Elias's raw pain, his desperate defiance, through the lingering residue of the binding cloak. "He cannot hold him for long," Seraphina thought, her mind sharply focused. "I need a safe place and Lyra needs immediate stabilization." She spotted a narrow, almost hidden side conduit, secured by a heavy, ancient iron gate. Unlike the other open tunnels, this one radiated a strange, suppressed heat and a distinct, sterile scent, a stark contrast to the surrounding decay. "In here," Seraphina commanded, kicking the rusted gate open. The conduit led into a small, dry chamber carved directly into the bedrock, clearly not part of the standard city drainage. It was an abandoned alchemical chamber, likely used by early shifters or mages to conduct forbidden research away from human eyes. The walls were lined with strange, runic etchings and there was a heavy, stone altar in the center. Seraphina deposited Lyra on a relatively dry ledge. "Rest. We have a moment." "Elias." "The wolf," Lyra gasped, her eyes wide with lingering terror. "He was defending you." "He is bound by necessity and a vow," Seraphina corrected sharply, pulling her obsidian locket forward. "But his debt must be repaid. Now tell me precisely, how does your locket stabilize the osmium, and how can we use that process to counteract the detonation without physical contact?" Lyra struggled to focus, shivering. "It's about frequency cancellation. The osmium compound vibrates at a specific, lethal frequency. My locket, the stabilizer, emits an opposing, unique human frequency that dampens the osmium. It's an internal, genetic countersignal. Kaelen amplified that signal to create his protective stabilizer." "And the Heartstone Essence?" Seraphina urged. The essence is pure, raw, magical power, Lyra explained. It vibrates at the highest possible magical frequency. If my stabilizer touches that, the resulting clash creates a zero-point collision. Instant, massive magical detonation. My brother knows this. He wants the magical world to be destroyed by its own source. Seraphina paced the small chamber, her long shadow dancing on the runic walls. She needed to disrupt the osmium's lethal frequency without triggering the essence's power. Frequency cancellation. She looked at the stone altar in the center of the room. It was etched with a massive, spiraling rune, the rune of attunement. This symbol was used in ancient magical practices to align disparate power sources. We can use this chamber, Seraphina declared, a cold brilliance entering her eyes. We will not touch. We will use the rune to project the essence's power, not directly onto your locket, but as a shielding wave against Kaelen's sonic attack. The essence will stabilize your external environment, giving your locket a chance to calm itself. It's too risky. Lyra cried out. If the projection is too strong, it will detonate the locket stabilizer from a distance. Then we must be precise, Seraphina said, moving to the altar. She placed the obsidian locket directly into the center of the rune of attunement. The essence immediately reacted to the ancient magic of the chamber, its white light intensifying, filling the chamber with a warm, steady glow. Seraphina sliced her palm with her talons, letting her potent, rich bloodline energy flow onto the rune-etched stone. We need a conduit. Your unique frequency must guide my magic. She instructed Lyra to place her silver locket not on the altar, but on a smaller, secondary rune carved 6 feet away, the rune of reflection. The two lockets glowed, separated by distance, but linked by the complex architecture of the ancient chamber. As Seraphina began the complex, near-fatal ritual, focusing the essence's power to flow through the chamber's runes, a sound of heavy, armored movement echoed sharply from the tunnel entrance. It wasn't Elias. It was Kaelen Thorne. He had managed to bypass the battle, or perhaps he had simply left the wolves to the Draken Hunter. Thorne stood at the iron gate, his face a mask of triumphant fury. He was holding a small silver tracking device. I knew it, Princess. The essence's magnetic field is a beautiful thing. It leads me right to the prize. He saw Lyra and the two lockets separated by the runic altar. His face twisted in rage. You dare interfere with the final stage. The essence is too pure for your projected games, Seraphina. It will still trigger the detonation. Thorne raised his osmium-tipped crossbow. He wasn't aiming at Seraphina. He was aiming at Lyra's silver locket, the catalyst. He intended to destroy the stabilizer and trigger the detonation manually. If I can't have a clean purge, Princess, Thorne snarled, aiming the weapon, then I will settle for a spectacular, messy annihilation. Seraphina was caught in the worst possible moment. Mid-ritual, her power fully focused on projecting the stabilizing wave. Moving would shatter the ritual and trigger the explosion. Just as Thorne's finger tightened on the crossbow's trigger, a massive, bloodied form crashed through the iron gate behind him. It was Elias. He was barely recognizable, bleeding profusely from deep wounds, his left foreleg broken and dragging uselessly, but he was alive. His eyes, fixed on Thorne, were no longer sapphire, but a terrifying, brilliant emerald green, the color of the Draken Hunter's eyes. He had defeated the hunter and somehow absorbed a piece of its strength. Elias didn't waste time. He lunged, not at Thorne's body but at the crossbow, knocking the weapon violently out of his hands just as the bolt fired, sending the osmium-tipped arrow harmlessly into the ceiling. You should have stayed dead, beast. Thorne shrieked, drawing a large, dark pistol and firing a volley of standard non-osmium rounds into Elias's shoulder and flank. Elias howled, stumbling back, but he had bought Seraphina the critical seconds she needed. Now Lyra. Seraphina roared, completing the final gesture of the projection ritual. A powerful visible wave of white, luminous energy pulsed out from the essence on the altar, flowing through the rune of attunement and washing over Lyra's silver locket. The locket's frantic tremor immediately calmed, the high-pitched whine ceasing. The projected essence hadn't caused detonation. It had surrounded the stabilizer, creating a perfect, protective frequency cocoon. Lyra was safe, stabilized, and no longer a detonator. Thorne stared in disbelief. Impossible. A projected field? You neutralized the catalyst. The purge ends here, Kaelen, Seraphina stated, finally free from the ritual. She stood, her full vampiric power restored, the essence vibrating gently on the altar. The battle for Lyra was over. The final confrontation for the Heartstone Essence and the fate of the magical world was about to begin. Kaelen Thorne stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock and fury. His entire meticulously calculated plan, using the Heartstone Essence as bait and Lyra as the detonator, had just been dismantled by Seraphina Valerius and her critically wounded Lycan ally Elias. "You fail to understand, Princess," Thorne hissed, discarding the ineffective pistol. He reached behind his back, drawing a pair of short, segmented blades, each pulsing with a faint, lethal osmium glow. "My goal is not merely to kill you, but to purify the world of your corruption. I am the architect of a new dawn, and you are merely the debris." Seraphina stepped away from the rune of attunement altar, her obsidian locket now gently humming, the full power of the essence ready to be deployed. "Purity is an illusion, Thorne," Seraphina countered, her voice dropping to the chilling, commanding tone of her bloodline. "You hide behind science and metal because you are weak. You are a human who fears the inevitable power that will always supersede you." She didn't wait. Seraphina launched herself at Thorne, her movement a streak of pure shadow. She didn't rely on brute force. She relied on speed, precision, and the terrifying ancient authority of her vampiric lineage. Thorne was surprisingly swift, moving with the trained efficiency of a ruthless assassin. He met her attack with his osmium blades, crossing them to block her talons. The blade struck Seraphina's armored gauntlet with a shriek of scraping metal. The osmium didn't penetrate, but the residual venom was a cold shock that tried to paralyze her arm. "The metal always wins, Princess," Thorne grunted, pressing his attack. "Your magic is obsolete." Meanwhile, Elias watched the fight, his massive body trembling with pain and exhaustion. The bullets Thorne fired were still embedded in his flesh, and his broken leg meant he couldn't stand, much less join the fight. But his eyes, the strange newly acquired emerald glow, were fixed on the osmium blades. Lyra, safe in the frequency cocoon, watched Elias with a terrified fascination. His eyes, they're like the Draken hunters. The emerald glow indicated that Elias, in his desperate fight against the Draken hunter, had absorbed a fragment of the hunter's innate magic, likely the specialized Lycan kinetic dampening ability, which allowed them to absorb and redirect physical force. Elias focused his will not on the fight but on the osmium blades. He tried to project the absorbed kinetic energy through the remnants of the binding cloak. On the altar, the Heartstone Essence pulsed in response to the Lycan's desperate will. As Thorne made a sweeping cut aimed at Seraphina's throat, Elias finally succeeded. A faint, emerald pulse of energy shot from Elias's eyes, not at Thorne but at the osmium blades. The blades reacted instantly. The faint osmium glow sputtered and died. The kinetic dampening ability had momentarily neutralized the osmium's magical charge, rendering it mere, dull metal. "What?" Thorne cried out, looking down at his inert weapons. Seraphina seized the opportunity. She slammed a foot onto Thorne's chest, sending him sprawling against the concrete wall. Before he could recover, she snatched one of the inert osmium blades. "You relied on metal, Thorne," Seraphina said, holding the dull blade. "I rely on power and the loyalty of the beast you tried to destroy." Thorne struggled to rise, his eyes filled with absolute fanaticism. "This isn't over. My supplies are still scattered across the city. I have enough osmium to poison the entire aquifer. You can't be everywhere." He was right. Even with Lyra neutralized, the osmium stockpiles were still a ticking threat, and Seraphina couldn't hunt them all. "Then I will take the one thing that matters," Seraphina declared. She raised the osmium blade. "Wait." Thorne shrieked, suddenly revealing a flash of panic. "Don't touch me with that. I know the full formula. I can replicate the essence. I am valuable." "Your knowledge is a danger," Seraphina stated simply. "Your existence is a liability." She plunged the osmium blade, now just plain, uncharged metal, not into his heart but into his thigh, pinning him brutally to the wall. Thorne screamed, the pure physical pain shocking him. Seraphina then used her vampiric compulsion, her ruby eyes blazing with ultimate control. "Tell me, Kaelen Thorne, where are the largest caches of osmium?" Thorne fought her compulsion, sweat beading on his forehead. The old, train depot. Sector Gamma, the main reservoir." His resistance failed. His eyes went blank, glassy. "The formula," Seraphina commanded. Thorne recited a complex series of chemical and alchemical compounds, the forgotten metallurgy that created the terrifying poison. Seraphina absorbed the information instantly, filing it away. She stepped back, the compulsion broken. Thorne slumped, gasping for breath, his resistance shattered. "We leave him," Seraphina stated, looking at Elias, who lay exhausted but triumphant. "The human authorities will find him pinned. Let them deal with their own kind." She walked to the altar and retrieved the Heartstone Essence. As the obsidian locket settled against her chest, the glow intensified, and the chamber felt warm again. Seraphina turned to Elias. His wounds were severe, but his breathing was steady. The faint emerald light faded, replaced by the familiar, intense sapphire. "You saved us, Elias," Seraphina acknowledged, her tone holding genuine respect. "The vow is due. You have earned your purity." She approached the massive wolf and pressed the glowing Heartstone Essence directly against his chest. The result was a quiet miracle. The essence, now fully attuned to the Lycans' unique magic, thanks to the brief Draken absorption, didn't detonate or clash. Instead, it sent a wave of pure, white energy flowing into Elias. The bullet holes closed almost instantly, the mangled fur smoothed, and the grotesque twist of his broken leg corrected itself with a sickening yet healing snap. Elias gasped. No, he shifted. In a sudden violent eruption of bone and muscle, the massive, frosted wolf dissolved, replaced by a powerfully built man. Elias was now a tall, rugged man with severe features, his skin marked with ancient tribal tattoos, and his sapphire eyes sharp and entirely free of the Osmium's paralyzing venom. He was whole. He was a shifter again. He looked at Seraphina, then down at his hands, a look of profound, agonizing relief on his face. He bowed his head low, not in submission but in the deepest, most sacred gratitude. "The debt is repaid, Princess," Elias said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble, finally free from the wolf's whine. "But the war is not." The stench of decay and the echoing water still permeated the alchemical chamber, but the atmosphere was now charged with a fierce, quiet resolve. Elias, whole again, his powerful frame radiating the confidence of a fully shifted Lycan, quickly dressed in the discarded water-soaked human clothes he had shed moments ago. His sapphire eyes, once desperate, now held a focused intensity. Lyra, stabilized and safe in the protective frequency cocoon, watched Seraphina and Elias with a silent awe. She was no longer just the terrified catalyst, she was the survivor of her brother's grand, dark plan. "Rhys," Elias stated, his voice deep and urgent. "He is still paralyzed at the loading dock. We need to move quickly before Thorne's hunters or the human authorities find him." Seraphina nodded, retrieving the osmium formula and cache locations that Kaelen Thorne had been forced to surrender. She stored them securely in a hidden compartment within her cloak. "The Draken hunter," Seraphina pointed out, her eyes narrowed in concern. "He will be crippled but not dead. We must assume Thorne's escape route is now compromised, and the Draken may still be near the perimeter." "He won't stop me," Elias vowed, his restored power thrumming. "I will move through the smaller drains. You take Lyra through the city's forgotten subways. Meet me near the clock tower perimeter where the power grid is weakest. We cannot risk being seen together in the tunnels." It was a risky yet sound plan. Seraphina and Lyra, moving quickly through abandoned transit tunnels, would draw less attention than a towering Lycan navigating the sewage system. Seraphina and Lyra emerged from the drainage system into the deserted gloom of the old central subway tunnels. The air here was drier, cleaner, and filled with the stale, metallic scent of disused rail lines. Seraphina maintained a respectful yet firm distance from Lyra, ensuring the two lockets never risked contact. "You saved my life, and that wolf's," Lyra whispered, breaking the heavy silence. "What? You are a vampire princess and we are nothing to your world." "You are the counter-catalyst, Lyra," Seraphina replied flatly, walking along the rusted tracks. "Your survival is crucial to the magical world's stability. Elias is a necessary asset. I act out of necessity, not charity." Lyra was silent for a moment, then spoke with surprising firmness. "You gave him back his full power, Princess. That was more than necessary. That was honor. Elias and his brother will be loyal to you, not because of the essence, but because of the price you paid." Seraphina did not respond, but Lyra's observation resonated with the ancient, unyielding code of her own bloodline. The debt was settled, but the alliance had deepened into a bond of respect forged in shared peril. They reached the designated meeting point, a cramped maintenance chamber beneath the main clock tower substation. The massive generators hummed loudly, creating a powerful, localized magnetic field that interfered with long-range magic, a perfect spot for a subtle exchange. Seraphina heard Elias before she saw him. Not the struggling drag of the wolf, but the sure, powerful footfalls of a warrior. He emerged from a narrow vent, carrying the massive limp form of Rhys draped over his shoulder. Rhys was still entirely paralyzed, his younger brother's face pale and drawn. "He is stable, but the venom is still in his core," Elias stated grimly, gently laying Rhys down on the concrete floor. I need the essence, princess. Just for a moment. Seraphina did not hesitate. She knelt, pressing the obsidian locket against Rhys's chest, just as she had done with Elias. The essence pulsed, sending a restorative wave into Rhys. Unlike the gradual healing of Elias, Rhys's recovery was immediate. The venom that had held him captive for hours was purged in seconds. Rhys's eyes snapped open, pure sapphire. He pushed himself up, his body immediately shifting, not into the immense wolf form but into his human form. A younger, slighter mirror of Elias but with the same powerful frame and fierce eyes. He looked at Seraphina, then at his brother, then back at Seraphina. He needed no explanation. The debt and the deep, shared understanding of survival was immediate. We owe you our lives, Princess Valerius, Rhys said, his voice a lighter tenor than Elias's, but equally resolute. The Lycan oath is now yours to command. The frozen wolves were no longer frozen. They were free shifters, bound to a vampire princess by an oath that superseded ancient blood feuds. Thorne listed 3 primary caches, Seraphina said, turning to the map she had mentally drawn based on Thorne's compelled confession. The main osmium supply is at the old train depot in Sector Gamma. We strike there first. It is the largest and most volatile. If we simply destroy the osmium, the resulting magical explosion could level this side of the city, Elias warned, running a hand over the map. We need a neutralizing agent. We have one, Seraphina stated, looking at Lyra. You said your unique frequency neutralizes the volatility of the osmium before magical interference. If we can flood the cache with your stabilizer frequency, we can use the essence to detonate the supply safely. Lyra's eyes widened. I can't generate the frequency without my locket. We won't need to, Seraphina said, reaching into her cloak and pulling out the inert, dull osmium blade she had pinned Thorne with. Thorne's formula explained that a strong electrical current, when passed through any osmium-infused metal, can amplify the human amplifier signal dormant within it. She looked at the humming generators around them. We are standing in a power station. We will use this blade, your locket, and this electricity to create a directed, concentrated neutralizing pulse. The plan was audacious. Turn Thorne's own weapon against his supplies, using his sister as the remote stabilizer. Elias and Rhys exchanged a look. A silent communication that contained centuries of shifter loyalty and a shared understanding of this vampire's terrifying, cold brilliance. We move, Elias declared. Rhys, scout the perimeter. Find us a path to Sector Gamma. Seraphina, prepare the charge. The newly forged alliance, the vampire princess, the catalyst, and the 2 Lycan shifters, began the final stage of their operation, the surgical cleansing of the city's hidden poison. The old train depot in Sector Gamma was a massive, abandoned structure, a graveyard of rusted locomotives and cavernous shadows. Its seclusion made it the perfect place for Kaelen Thorne to store his most volatile osmium supply. Elias and Rhys, moving with the quiet, synchronized efficiency of high-ranking Lycan shifters, had successfully secured the perimeter. They confirmed no immediate threats from human law enforcement or the recovering Draken hunter. They found the main cache in a defunct maintenance bay, concealed beneath heavy, tarp-covered crates. Seraphina and Lyra entered the depot, the air heavy with the metallic tang of decay and the subtle, chilling hum of the concentrated osmium. The bulk of the osmium is here, Seraphina whispered, her voice barely carrying in the vast space. It's suspended in liquid form within reinforced steel drums. If those drums are breached before stabilization, the sheer amount of osmium dust released will be lethal for miles. The plan required flawless execution, relying on the unique counterfrequency of a human catalyst. Elias had already connected the inert osmium blade, the one Seraphina had used to pin Thorne, to the depot's massive exposed power conduit. The blade was now humming, ready to carry the electrical current. Lyra, your silver locket, Seraphina instructed. Place it directly on the blade. The current will amplify your stabilizer frequency, creating the neutralizing pulse. Lyra, though terrified, possessed a quiet, resolute bravery. She unclasped the silver locket and, maintaining extreme caution to avoid Seraphina's Heartstone Essence, placed it gently onto the osmium blade. The instant the locket touched the blade, a low, resonant hum filled the depot. It wasn't dangerous, it was the sound of Lyra's human frequency being amplified by the massive electrical current. A gentle, shimmering silver field began to pulse outward from the blade. Now the final stage, Seraphina stated, her eyes locking onto Elias. Elias, I need you to place this blade directly against the central drum of the cache. The frequency cocoon must envelop the supply. Elias took the charged blade carefully. His full shifter strength was necessary to maintain contact against the immense pressure of the Osmium's magical resistance. He moved swiftly, avoiding the rusted debris. He pressed the blade against the largest central drum. The neutralizing frequency slammed into the Osmium supply. The entire cache of steel drums pulsed violently, emitting a wave of shimmering silver light as the Osmium's lethal frequency was dampened. The threat of volatile explosion was neutralized. "It's stable," Seraphina confirmed, the essence on her chest humming with relief. "Now we detonate it safely." Elias, retract the blade. Elias yanked the blade back, disconnecting the neutralizing charge. Seraphina then channeled the full power of the Heartstone Essence. She raised her hand toward the drums, her ruby eyes blazing with a destructive ancient power. She focused the essence not on explosion but on magical annihilation, turning the stable osmium compound into inert, harmless dust. A fierce column of pure, white energy erupted from Seraphina's hand and slammed into the osmium drums. The resulting reaction was instantaneous and silent. The steel drums didn't explode. They imploded, the osmium liquid vaporizing and dissolving into nothingness. The entire cache of Thorne's deadliest weapon vanished, leaving behind only the clean, sharp scent of ozone. "One down," Seraphina whispered, breathing hard. The effort had been immense. Rhys, who had been guarding the main entrance, suddenly slammed a hand against the rusted iron door in a silent warning. "Movement. Heavily armed. Approaching rapidly." "Thorne is not dead," Elias realized grimly. "He must have a secondary retrieval team, or the Draken Hunter is closer than we thought." "We move," Seraphina commanded, retrieving the lockets. "The next target is the main reservoir. We need to secure the city's water supply before Thorne can poison the populace." As they slipped out of the maintenance bay and back into the dark labyrinth of the train depot, a squad of heavily armored, black-clad figures burst into the depot. They weren't police. They were mercenaries, armed with strange, energy-focused weapons. Likely Thorne's Order of the Crimson Quill's remaining security detail. The team hadn't seen them, but they had found the empty maintenance bay and the signs of magical energy. The leader of the squad, a massive man in heavy tactical gear, pointed towards the exit. "They're heading to the reservoir. Thorne's last orders: secure the second cache at all costs." Seraphina, Elias, Rhys and Lyra were now racing through the city, heading towards the next crucial target, with Thorne's desperate, well-equipped mercenaries hot on their heels. The final confrontation was drawing near. The sprint from the old train depot to the main reservoir was a desperate, two-pronged race against time. Seraphina took the high road with Lyra. Her renewed vampiric speed allowed her to traverse the city's rooftops in blurring leaps, using shadows and high-rise structures for cover. Lyra, secured against Seraphina's side, maintained careful separation between the two lockets. Below them, Elias and Rhys were the bait. They ran straight through the city's main avenues, their immense speed drawing the immediate and focused attention of Thorne's mercenaries. The shifters were faster than the armored squad, but the mercenaries' energy weapons were relentless, ripping apart the asphalt where the Lycans had been moments before. Elias, now fully restored, embraced the distraction. Led them towards the reservoir's main intake building. Elias commanded Rhys through a silent Lycan link. "It's high and exposed. They'll have to stop using heavy fire once they enter the complex." The mercenaries chased Elias and Rhys to the perimeter fence of the reservoir, a vast, open complex of concrete basins and humming industrial pipes. The Lycans, seeing the armored squad closing in, executed their final planned move. Elias stopped, his body rippling violently as he executed a full, devastating shift. The massive white wolf erupted into existence, letting out a territorial roar that echoed off the steel structures. He slammed his body into the thick perimeter fence, tearing a massive hole that allowed Rhys to slip through. Rhys remained in his human form, his agility the perfect counter to the mercenaries' heavy armor. As Elias engaged the main force, Rhys circled wide, using the cover of the pipes to flank the squad. The mercenaries, momentarily stunned by the appearance of the immense Lycan, shifted their fire. Elias, absorbing the first volley of energy blasts, used the kinetic dampening ability he had unconsciously absorbed from the Draken Hunter. The blasts hit his fur, but the force was absorbed and redistributed, allowing him to charge into the mercenaries' formation like a furry, unstoppable tank. Meanwhile, Rhys scaled the high water tower overlooking the skirmish. From this vantage point he began to use his specialized training, throwing heavy wrenches and disconnected pipe joints at the weakest points of the mercenaries' armor, the joints and visors, creating a precise, deadly distraction. The two brothers had created a perfect, chaotic shield. Seraphina and Lyra used the distraction to reach the waterworks pumping station, a massive, glass-walled structure overlooking the reservoir pool. Inside, the osmium cache was exactly where Thorne had promised. A single large containment unit suspended by chains directly over the main water intake valve. A glowing, red numerical countdown timer was fixed to the unit, T-5 minutes. Thorne had rigged a timed release to poison the city's entire water supply if the depot was breached. The timer is electrical, Seraphina hissed. But the release is a failsafe. We can't just cut the wire. She spotted the control panel, an ancient, bulky interface. Lyra, you're locked on the panel. We need to flood the whole room with your frequency. I'll use the essence to power the projection, but you must focus on the containment unit. Seraphina activated the Heartstone Essence, placing it on her chest, its light bathing the room. Lyra, placing her silver locket on the control panel, closed her eyes and focused on the containment unit above the intake valve. The entire pumping station filled with a shimmering silver pulse, the neutralizing frequency amplified by the essence. The red light on the countdown timer sputtered and dimmed, its electronic components failing under the magical countersignal. The countdown stopped. The mechanism is safe, Seraphina stated, relief washing over her. Now for the osmium itself. She raised her hand towards the containment unit. A concentrated white beam of magical annihilation shot from her palm and into the osmium. Just as in the depot, the liquid inside shimmered, vaporized, and dissolved silently, leaving only empty, clean containers. The threat to the city's water supply was gone. Below, the battle was reaching a brutal conclusion. Elias, using his superior strength, had battered most of the mercenary armor into submission. Rhys had disabled the squad leader, forcing him to surrender. Seraphina, descending from the pumping station, landed beside the two shifters. She surveyed the scene of immobilized, defeated men. They are Thorne's dogs, Seraphina said, her voice sharp. But they are not the enemy. They are merely misguided humans. She used a quick, precise flash of essence energy, not for destruction but for a focused, non-lethal psychic shutdown, disabling the remaining mercenaries' comm systems and leaving them unconscious but unharmed. Elias approached the captured squad leader and ripped off his helmet. The man was terrified. Where is the final osmium cache? Elias demanded. The leader, eyes wide, stammered. The Sector Gamma power plant. He was building the final device there. A massive, directed energy weapon. He said it would trigger the worldwide magical collapse. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. Thorne hadn't just been poisoning the city, he was building a weapon of mass magical destruction. The final move, Seraphina confirmed, turning to the horizon. We move now. The game ends at the power plant. The four allies, Vampire Princess, Lycans, and Catalyst, left the neutralized reservoir behind, heading towards the looming derelict towers of the Sector Gamma power plant, where Kaelen Thorne was preparing his ultimate apocalyptic device. The Sector Gamma power plant was a vast, decaying monument to abandoned human industry. Its skeletal towers and silent smokestacks loomed against the pale pre-dawn sky, radiating an unsettling quiet. Unlike the reservoir, this place felt charged, humming not with electrical energy, but with raw, contained magical potential. Seraphina led the charge, her senses screaming with the proximity of massive, concentrated osmium. She moved with Elias and Rhys in a triangle formation, Lyra protected in the center. The core containment room, Seraphina directed, remembering Thorne's coerced confession. It's beneath the main reactor deck. That's where the weapon is. Rhys, using his superior agility, scouted ahead and returned instantly. Security is different, Princess. No armored humans. Just strange, shimmering energy fields guarding the entrance. Magical wards heavily reinforced. Thorne is protecting his creation with magic, not science, Elias confirmed, shifting his powerful weight. He must be inside, making his final adjustments. Seraphina examined the wards, a complex weave of ancient Lycan warding spells, powered by stolen vampiric bloodlines. Thorne had twisted everything. We cannot simply break the wards, it will destabilize the weapon, Seraphina assessed. Elias, Rhys, you are shifters. You understand the flow of these wards better than I do. Find the keystone, the point where the wards draw their power, and neutralize it. Buy me time to confront Thorne. The two Lycans nodded and immediately shifted into their wolf forms, not the massive white creatures of their full power but sleek, fast shadows, their movements silent and fluid. They melted into the shadows of the power plant, circling the core room. Seraphina used the Lycan's distraction to slip past the outer warding. She found the entrance to the core room, a heavy, lead-lined blast door. She used her full vampiric strength, augmented by the Heartstone Essence, to rip the door off its hinges with a tremendous, grating tear of metal. The room inside was a spectacle of terrifying ambition. In the center stood a colossal, segmented device, the global collapse weapon. It was a massive osmium-infused metallic spire, pulsating with dark, lethal energy. Feeding the spire were hundreds of small vials, each containing a concentrated dose of osmium venom. And standing before the control console, adjusting the final frequency, was Kaelen Thorne. He was no longer pinned. He was bandaged, pale, and entirely focused on the console. "Ah, Princess," Thorne sighed, turning slowly, an air of calm, terrifying resignation about him. "You are precisely on time for the grand finale. I knew the essence would lead you here. I am initiating the global collapse sequence now." Thorne pressed a final, flashing red button. The osmium spire began to hum, the frequency growing higher and more violent, threatening to shatter the glass in the room. "You are too late," Thorne stated, holding up a small crystal amplifier. "This weapon uses the essence's activated frequency as a global trigger. Your very existence here has doomed us all. Your precious Heartstone will be the source of the purge." Seraphina pushed Lyra behind a reinforced console. "Lyra, if the spire fires, what is the counter frequency? Can we use your locket one last time?" "It's a global magical frequency, Seraphina," Lyra cried out. "My locket is only a local stabilizer. We need a magical signal so powerful it can override the global trigger." Thorne merely laughed, a high manic sound. "There is no magic that powerful, Princess. Only annihilation." Outside, the Lycans had found the keystone. Rhys and Elias, working in synchronized desperation, used their powerful jaws to tear apart the conduit powering the ward. The complex magical wards protecting the core room instantly collapsed. Simultaneously, the main osmium spire surged, the frequency reaching critical mass. The final phase of the weapon, the worldwide magical collapse, was moments away. Seraphina knew Lyra was right. Local stabilization wouldn't work. To override a global trigger, she needed a global-scale signal. She needed to activate the full, unfettered power of the Heartstone Essence and project it across the globe, a signal so strong it would neutralize the osmium frequency everywhere at once. But doing that meant exposing her bloodline's core and the essence's full power, a move that would drain her completely, perhaps fatally. Seraphina pulled the Heartstone Essence from her neck. Its blinding light filled the room. She held the ancient, sacred locket high above her head. The Lycan oath, "Elias, Rhys, give me your strength," Seraphina screamed, her voice cutting through the high-pitched whine of the spire. Outside the room, Elias and Rhys, responding to the ancient, desperate command, pushed every ounce of their restored Lycan energy, their focus, their resilience, their raw kinetic dampening power, through the remnants of the binding cloak connection and into Seraphina. The combined force, vampire bloodline, Lycan power, and the Heartstone Essence, erupted in a column of pure, white gold energy that shot through the ceiling of the power plant and into the sky. It was a silent, magnificent explosion of raw, untainted magic. The spire's lethal osmium frequency met the pure, concentrated power of the bloodline unity. The spire did not explode. It imploded, collapsing inward on itself with a soundless pressure, the osmium component dissolving into nothingness. The entire weapon, Thorne's apocalyptic vision, was annihilated, leaving only inert metal and dust. Thorne stared, his eyes wide, his face drained of color. His power, his science, his entire existence was undone. "No," Thorne whispered, broken. "Purity is lost." Seraphina, drained of all strength, collapsed onto her knees, the essence falling from her grasp. She was alive, but the world was saved at the highest possible cost to her core. Elias and Rhys, shifting back into their human forms, rushed into the room. They ignored the defeated Thorne, focusing only on the fallen princess. "Seraphina," Elias urged, supporting her weak body. "You must consume the essence. Restore your core." Seraphina shook her head, her voice thin. "No. The essence has been expended. It is dormant, perhaps permanently. My power is limited now." She looked at Thorne, who was weeping silently on the floor. "The war is over, Lycans. The price is paid. The world is safe." "Not yet," Elias said, his voice firm. He and Rhys lifted Seraphina and the dormant essence. They looked at Lyra, who stood by the console, finally safe and free. Rhys looked at Thorne. "He must be dealt with." "No," Seraphina whispered. "His final prison is his failure. Leave him to the sun." As the four allies left the core room, the first rays of dawn broke over the city. They left Kaelen Thorne alone in the shattered core room of the power plant, facing the consequences of his magnificent, terrible collapse. The vampire princess, stripped of her immediate power but victorious, was supported by the two Lycan shifters who owed her their freedom, and the human catalyst who owed her life. The frozen wolves had begged a vampire princess to enter, and in doing so, they forged a new, unbreakable unity that saved the world from darkness.